Greetings, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today. We're very glad to have you with us. We'll be getting started now. So please feel free to pull up a comfy chair, grab your tea, coffee, whatever makes you comfy for the next hour. We want to just walk you through some quick logistics for those of you who haven't attended one of our webinars before. We have you all on mute to conserve audio quality, but please, as you think of questions through our presentation, please feel free to share them in our question box, and we'll be having a Q&A portion towards the end of the presentation, and we'll get to as many of those questions as we can. We're joining you today via audio only to conserve everyone's, I'm sure, very strained internet bandwidth. And you'll be hearing from our presenters throughout the hour on audio. And just a reminder that if you need to duck out at any time, or if you want to share this presentation with any one of your colleagues who miss it, we will share materials with you within a couple of days. So we hope that you'll find this presentation helpful and that you'll share it onwards with your colleagues who may also be able to gather knowledge from it. So before we get started, we would like to begin by acknowledging that we are joining you from Toronto, which is situated on traditional territories. These territories include the Wendat, Anishinaabeg Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nations, and the Métis Nation. Toronto is in the Dish with One Spoon territory. The Dish with One Spoon is a treaty between the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas, and Haudenosaunee that bound them to share the territory and protect the land. Subsequent Indigenous nations and peoples, Europeans, and all newcomers have been invited into this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. Today, the meeting place of Toronto is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we're grateful to have the opportunity to work in the community in this territory. We would like to acknowledge and thank everyone on the line joining us from traditional territories across Turtle Island. We're honored to be having this discussion with you, and we thank you for taking such valuable time out of your day to join us. My name is Glenna Harris. I'm Manager of Learning and Training here at Prosper Canada. If you're new to our work, we are a national charity dedicated to working with partners across sectors to ensure that Canadians have access to the financial programs, products, and services that they need, regardless of their income. We envision a future in which all Canadians and newcomers have access to quality support when they need it, and certainly to free and safe tax filing, which we'll be hearing about today. And we also want to acknowledge and recognize that, as we start the last month of the year, we certainly acknowledge that most of this year has been spent living under a very different reality as a result of the COVID pandemic. And we've all had to adapt our program delivery and materials in a number of different ways. And yet it's very hard to imagine a more important time for us to be doing this work. So thank you to everyone on the line for your valuable work and commitment to financial empowerment. We're so glad to have you with us, and I'm pleased to introduce our speakers today, both of whom come from the Community Volunteer Income Tax Program, which is administered by the Canada Revenue Agency. Sabrina Ruta is a proud public servant and a Montrealer. She has been with the Canada Revenue Agency since 2008. She was managing CVITP and the Benefits Outreach Program in the province of Quebec from 2018 to 2020, and currently she leads the development of the CVITP training for volunteers. So welcome, Sabrina. Philip Samolenko.
Thank you.
Oh, welcome, Sabrina.
Sorry.
That's all right. Philip Samolenko is a proud public servant who began his career with the Canada Revenue Agency in 1997 in the International Tax Services Office in Ottawa. He's currently the manager of the Program Delivery and Support section for the Community and Outreach Program. Away from the office, he enjoys coaching his son and daughter in minor hockey. So welcome, Philip, and I hope you enjoy some good hockey this coming season.
Thank you.
As I said, I'm Glenna Harris. I'm here with Prosper Canada for 5 years now, based out of Toronto. And through our learning and training team, we deliver our public webinar series with events such as this one, as well as our online financial literacy training and a number of other resources through our online learning hub. And away from work life, I'm certainly looking forward to getting in some baking time this winter. So wherever you are in Canada or elsewhere, I hope that this coming winter is both productive and restful in the ways that you need it. So today's presentation is going to be all about community tax clinics in the virtual sense for this coming season. And our speakers are going to take you through a number of different points here that will be relevant to community tax clinics in the virtual realm. They'll tell us a little bit about the program, a little bit about the impact of the pandemic, and more importantly, dive into some details around the training materials that are available through registration with CVITP, what's new for 21, and details about virtual clinics. So however, as usual, before we dive into our presentation, our panelists would love to know a little bit more about your experience so that they can get a sense of who's out there in the audience. So we have a few polls for you. And our first one is, I think, perhaps our most curious one. We'd love to know if you've delivered virtual clinics before. Yes, maybe you did so already in 2020. Maybe you haven't yet, but you're definitely planning to this year. Or maybe you already use other contactless methods such as drop-off filing, which may be ongoing. Or maybe you have another method that we haven't thought of yet in this poll. We'd love to hear any other thoughts you have there in the question box. So I'll leave this poll up for about 30 seconds longer. All right, I'll close the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. So Sabrina and Philip, it looks like folks on the line, just over half have already begun to do virtual tax filing this year. Another quarter are planning to this coming tax season. About a third are offering other methods like drop-off filing. And then we have some other answers in the question responses around, we have volunteers who are not running a clinic, but they volunteer. We have someone offering self-filing support, and we have another response about researching different options. So thank you, everyone. That was wonderful to hear your answers there. We have a question around your volunteers as well. Would you be able to tell us, are your volunteers mostly returning? Are they evenly split between returning and new, or are they mostly new? And I realize that's not a totally numeric method of categorization there, but we'd love to get a sense of where your volunteer base is at a glance. So I'll leave this one open for about 20 more seconds. All right, I'll close this in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. So Mark and Sabrina, it looks like we have, again, a little over half are mostly returning volunteers. And we have about a fifth or 21% mostly new, and then the remainder split evenly. And to get a sense of numbers, we have almost 150 of you on the line right now, so that should give you a sense of that breakdown. So thank you for that. And we have one more for you. Thank you for sharing your experience with us, and one more question. We'd love to know what type of training materials you rely on, as our presenters are keen to share more with you about their training program. So tell us, do you mostly rely on CVITP materials, on your own materials, or a combination of both? All right, so I'll close this one again in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. And Sabrina and Philip, it looks like about half are using some combination, and the other half split evenly between more on CVITP and more on their own. So I hope that gives you some good information. And thank you again. Thank you again, everyone, for that information about your own program. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our speakers from CVITP who are going to walk us through their program and what we can expect from their training and associated materials this year. So Philip, over to you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Glenna. Hi, everyone. My name is Phil Smolenko. First, I'd like to say thank you to Prosper Canada for inviting Sabrina and I to speak to you today, and thank you specifically to Glenna for helping us prepare for this meeting. From my bio and introduction, you know that I work for the Canada Revenue Agency in the Community Outreach and Support team. I like working for the agency, and I truly love serving Canadians. I like seeing the impact my work has on everyday Canadians from across Canada, and I'm sure that's a motivation we all share. Running clinics and volunteering within CVITP not only helps individuals complete their tax returns and access credits and benefits offered through filing, but it makes our communities a better place. Today, Sabrina and I will be speaking to you about the Community Volunteer Income Tax Program. We will speak to the changes our program has undergone since the early days of the pandemic. We will speak about this coming year, specifically virtual clinics and what we're doing to support you. We will also speak to the training and support available to all our community organizations through the program. To situate ourselves, let's talk about the program a little. The CVITP is an arm's length collaboration between community organizations and the CRA. In the province of Quebec, the CVITP is referred to as the Income Tax Assistance Volunteer Program. There, it is administered jointly by the CRA and Revenue Quebec. In both programs, the mandate is to increase benefits and credits uptake by helping individuals complete their tax returns. Completing and filing a tax return for an individual who has a modest income and simple tax situation can help them gain access to or continue to receive the government benefits and credits to which they are entitled. Within the program, community organizations throughout Canada operate on a volunteer basis to host tax preparation clinics. These tax preparation clinics are where volunteers and taxpayers connect in order for taxpayers to have their returns completed free of charge. A clinic used to be strictly a physical location where tax preparation services were offered, but of course, now we have added virtual clinics to the program. As stated, volunteers are needed at each of these clinics in order to complete the returns. Volunteers are required to register online with CRA and then are affiliated to an organization. In order to safeguard the personal information of taxpayers using the program, all CVITP volunteers must meet security requirements set by the program. So that's a general overview of the CVITP program. Now, as you probably have guessed, I'm a numbers guy. Go figure, a CRA employee interested in numbers. Who knew? To that end, I'm going to share with you some program numbers. Last year, we had 3,814 organizations and 18,968 volunteers in the program. They helped 407,408 people file 467,370 returns. Looking at a year-over-year comparison, you'll see that the number of organizations increased while we had a slight decrease in the number of volunteers working in these clinics. Where we really see the impact of the pandemic in the numbers, it's in the numbers of people helped and the number of returns filed. With that said, I don't like to use these numbers as it doesn't take into account the reality of the program of 2020. As you know, in 2020, the filing deadline was extended for 2019 returns. Many CVITP clinics stayed open through the summer months and continued filing returns for their clients. Our stats only include the returns filed and the people helped up until May 15th, 2020. So to give a clearer picture of the program and to reflect the realities faced in 2020, I like to point out that over 175,000 additional people were helped and file another 197,000 returns since May 16, 2020, bringing our totals closer to 584,000 people helped and 664,000 returns filed. With that said, the effects of the pandemic cannot be denied. The timing of the pandemic from a program perspective could not have been any worse. With that said, what stood out for me during this time was the strength of the program and the desire to help others as community organizations met and overcame the challenges related to the pandemic. Next slide. As I said, the CVITP is a collaboration between community organizations and the CRA. In this partnership, the community organization hosts the free tax clinics, manages resources and volunteers, keeps taxpayers' information secure and confidential, makes sure that all volunteer registrations are approved before they start volunteering. And for our part, the CRA offers guidance and support, provides training for volunteers, provides free tax preparation software, operates a year-round dedicated helpline for volunteers, provides promotional material, and donates used laptops to eligible organizations. But it doesn't stop there. Next slide. In an effort to continually adapt to the program to the needs of the program and the population, the CRA solicits feedback from our stakeholders. We regularly engage with national partners and we conduct surveys, public opinion research, and case studies. This has led to some improvements in our back office, such as the implementation of a CVITP management tool that's used as a portal, guiding our CRA staff through various processes and workflows in the CVITP. We've improved our data gathering through the use of business intelligence tools to track demographic, geographic, and income information, as well as the program impact in communities. Autofill My Return was rolled out to all volunteers for the 2018 tax year, simplifying the filing process by leveraging taxpayer data held by the CRA. And finally, we're following a learning needs analysis to determine the training gaps for CVITP volunteers. A new online training tool is introduced. It is that last piece that I'd like to invite Sabrina to speak to now. Sabrina, over to you.
Perfect, thank you, Phil. Hello, my name is Sabrina Ruta. I've been with the CRA since 2008 and with the CVITP and Outreach Program in Quebec since 2018. I recently started working for headquarters where I'm leading the development of the CVITP training for volunteers. When I was in the Quebec region, I led the outreach officers who do presentations in the community, the coordinators who run the CVITP program, and I oversaw the development of the training for the Quebec CVITP volunteers. This is such a wonderful program. Over the past few years, I've had the chance to meet with organizations and volunteers. I'm always impressed by their commitment to their communities. They really want to help vulnerable people do their taxes and get their benefits and credits. Some volunteers bring a lot of knowledge and experience with them, but others can feel a little intimidated by all of the tax information out there and how to use the tax software. We know new volunteers want to feel confident and comfortable whether they have an actual person in front of them or if they're going through a pile of tax slips. We want to help reduce the burden on organizations by providing volunteers with the training they need, even if it's just a quick refresher and new information on what's new for the tax year. This is why we offer two ways to learn, webinars and our training website. And the process is ongoing. We're always looking into developing our training for volunteers with all of our organizations and volunteers in mind, whether they are new, experienced, or somewhere in between. Next slide, please. So for many years, the CRA has offered a variety of training sessions covering different topics, including some that are tailored to your region's specific needs. During these sessions, our coordinators share practical information that help volunteers fill out tax returns. They also share information that can apply to specific situations, for example, persons with disabilities, newcomers, and seniors. During these webinars, volunteers can ask CRA coordinators questions about training, so it allows two-way communication between the participants and the CVITP coordinators. Due to the pandemic and social distancing measures, we will continue to offer training through webinars. In-person training may also be available when public health recommendations allow us to do so. Next slide, please. Thank you. In addition to our more traditional training, we have a fairly new volunteer training website. We're very proud of it, and I'll give you a quick walkthrough in a few moments. But before, I just wanted to give you a bit of background information. As Phil mentioned, in an effort to continually adapt the program to the needs of the population, the CRA solicits feedback from our stakeholders. We regularly engage with national partners. This was the case in June 2019 when 5 CVITP volunteers, 5 representatives from partner organizations, and 5 CRA coordinators from all over the country met to identify how to improve training for CVITP volunteers. Out of this meeting came several training and non-training recommendations to address our partners' learning needs. These recommendations are the blueprint for our website, and we're constantly working on implementing more of the recommendations so our volunteers have the information they need 24/7, only a few clicks away. In essence, over the last year or so, we've created an external web-based self-study product for both volunteers and organizations to build a one-stop shop learning environment tailored to the need of each target audience. This website covers a wide range of topics relating to CVITP, including roles and responsibilities of organizations and volunteers, basic tax concepts, step-by-step instructions on filling returns electronically, and typical situations encountered by CVITP volunteers. We also provide the training information in PDF format. This allows for offline learning or printing the material for in-person training in remote areas where internet access is not always an option. As mentioned earlier, we know volunteers come from different backgrounds and have varying tax knowledge. Our website provides new or returning CVITP volunteers the option to build knowledge, but also has job aids always available. Our site has been up and running since last winter, and it will be updated in a few weeks with new information. And we're constantly looking into improving it based on our partners' feedback. So please let us know if you have any comments or suggestions. Next slide, please. For example, 2 topics we think might be of interest this tax season are the CERB and virtual tax clinics. And these 2 subjects will be covered in our training. Next slide, please. Thank you. Our training site also includes handy resources from phone numbers to forms. So if you'll allow me, I'd like to do a quick walkthrough of our website just so I can show you some different features we have.
Thanks, Sabrina. I'm just turning over presenter access to you now.
Perfect, thank you very much. So this is what our fairly new training website looks like. So and this was really the creation of the working group who came in 2019. So you can find really some basic information for newer members, but also an overview of what's new for returning and experienced volunteers. 2 sections that are of interest are frequent client scenarios and resources. I'd like to show you an example of frequent client scenarios. So we know that some information applies to all tax returns, but in some cases there could be specific situations, and we try to tailor them to actual cases that your volunteers will see. We have incarcerated individuals, Indigenous people, individuals with a partner. I'd like to show you an example with persons with disabilities. They're all based on the same structure, where we go over a bit of background information. Then we go into more specific need to know. I can show you an example of the type of information we have here. So we go over the lines and specific information that you might need. One thing that is really helpful are the screen-by-screen instructions for U-File. So we really take the guesswork out and we try to go step by step. All the information is also available with described pictures. And to allow volunteers to practice, we have examples that are taken from real life situations where we go, we provide background information and the solution. So me just, so people can get a chance to practice and see how everything fits in together. So another feature of our website that I'd like to share with you are our resources. Let me just go here. So our resources are intended to be a one-stop shop where you can find different information, and there's different links where you can browse around, helpful links to benefit information, helpful contacts for our call centers, and also useful forms. So it's really intended to be used as a resource for all our volunteers. So that covers the training portion for me. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Sabrina. That was really helpful. I'll bring us back into our presentation now. And thanks again for covering those resource examples. I know I see a couple questions coming in about your training website, so I'll definitely make sure we get time to several of those in our Q&A portion. So thanks, Sabrina. And Philip, I think we're back over to you.
Excellent. Again, thank you so much, Glenna. I'd like to tell you about what's new for the program in 2021. New to the program this year, all approved organizations will be assigned a CVITP Organization Identification Number, or what is simply to be known as the COIN. The COIN will be included in the approval letter an organization receives. The COIN is a unique and permanent identifier that, beginning this year, will be entered into CVITP software and used for statistical and reporting purposes. Also beginning this year, Autofill My Return can be used for the CVITP volunteers when completing the current year and 3 previous tax years returns. That means volunteers can file the 2020 return along with the 2017, 2018, and 2019 returns. AFR is a secure CRA service that can be used to automatically fill in parts of a taxpayer's federal income tax and benefit return with information that the CRA has available at the time of filing. The CRA encourages the use of autofill as it helps to reduce errors and ensure accuracy. It also improves service to taxpayers who don't have copies of their information slips when they go to a tax clinic and can't pass the CRA confidentiality requirements needed to obtain over the phone. In 2021, we will continue to support organizations who choose to host free virtual clinics. Virtual clinics provide a great option for organizations who want to continue to help complete tax returns while still following physical distancing rules. So let's talk about virtual clinics. A virtual clinic is any clinic that offers eligible individuals the option to have their taxes completed by a CVITP volunteer without any physical contact. There are 3 types of virtual clinics that you can offer: video conferencing, telephone, or a modified drop-off clinic. The type of clinic you host will be determined by your preference and by the methods of communication accessible to your volunteers and the individuals they serve. Virtual clinics can be hosted by approved CVITP organizations with affiliated and approved volunteers who are willing to offer their services virtually. Your organization can decide to use all, some, or none of these options. Regardless of the type of clinic you choose to host, the usual roles and responsibilities remain the same. However, we suggest you consider the following. For clinics that use video conferencing or telephone as a means of contact, you should obtain contact information for the individual and establish a way in which to connect volunteers with individuals that is acceptable to both parties. For example, you can provide the volunteer with the individual's contact information and have them reach out to the individual at a predetermined time. For clinics that use a modified drop-off clinic, if the individual's identity cannot be confirmed upfront at the time of if it can be confirmed upfront at the time of drop-off while respecting physical distancing, then you should do so. You should also develop an intake process where you ensure that you provide the volunteer with the individual's contact information, as well as information that may be required for completing their return, like date of birth, current address, marital status, and so on. Also, you should establish a process to provide the volunteers with the dropped off materials while also respecting physical distancing guidelines. You can register your virtual clinic with CRA by completing the clinic web form. Once you do that, you can promote your virtual clinics as you would any other clinic. For example, you can do that through social media like Facebook and Instagram, or by simply agreeing to post the clinic on the CRA website at canada.ca. The great thing about virtual clinics is that they can be held anywhere. Volunteers can complete returns from their home or other location where physical distancing requirements and provincial municipal guidelines are respected. Next slide. So as part of our program review, we gathered information, input, and experiences in respect of virtual clinics from volunteer organizations and partners. Some of the things we heard is that the virtual clinic option is best suited for volunteers with some experience with the CVITP and who are comfortable working independently. Ideally, volunteers should also be approved to use Autofill My Return. It's not mandatory. Volunteers may need some or all of the following depending on the virtual clinic they choose: a valid CVITP e-file account, reliable internet service, access to video conferencing software, access to a phone, and an email address. Because the volunteer may be using a personal cell phone or an email address to contact the individuals, we highly recommend that volunteers create an email account specific for their CVITP activities and use a block function to mask their phone number if they will be contacting an individual. Virtual clinics are a great option for volunteers who want to participate with organizations outside their local community and complete tax returns for individuals from across their province or territory. Virtual clinics provide an important service to individuals who, due to the pandemic or other physical barriers, may not have access to an actual tax clinic location. Next slide. One of the biggest considerations when running a virtual clinic is confirming the identity of the person that you're helping. With traditional clinics, this was done by meeting the individual face-to-face and reviewing their ID. With virtual clinics, you have 4 options available to confirm the identity of the individual. First, and the easiest, is if your organization or the volunteer knows the individual and can confirm their identity. Perhaps the individual had their tax return completed by a volunteer in your organization previously. This could easily be determined by asking the individual during the screening phase. The second option would be confirming the individual with information provided by AFR once consent has been obtained to use the service. The volunteer could read a script and send authorization through the tax preparation software. Perhaps the volunteer can authenticate the individual with information found in the tax slip. The third option would be to have the volunteer confirm identification visually through video conferencing. There are many video conferencing options available, so you can conduct that meeting virtually. If the volunteer cannot confirm the individual's identity using one of the previous options, the volunteer can prepare an email request to have an individual's identity confirmed over the phone by a CRA employee. The volunteer would simply send an email to CRA, including some basic information. If the individual's language of correspondence is in English or French, they can expect a call back within 1 business day or on the date and time requested. The CRA employee will ask the individual questions to confirm their identity. As such, the volunteer may want to suggest that the individual have previous tax returns and information slips on hand. To reassure the individual of the legitimacy of the call, the CRA employee will also provide the date of the individual's call with the volunteer. Once the individual has been contacted by the CRA, the volunteer will receive an email from CRA advising them of the outcome of the call. If the individual's identity is confirmed, the volunteer will contact them and proceed with completing their tax return. If the individual's identity is not confirmed, the volunteer must delete all of the individual's personal and tax information and return all documents belonging to the individual to the organization. Next slide. At this point, there's only one other topic that I would like to bring up, and that is our CVITP communication strategy. For this year, our strategy is divided into 3 phases: volunteer recruitment, clinic promotion, and volunteer appreciation. The volunteer recruitment phase began in the 2nd week of October and will continue until the end of January. Hopefully you've seen some of the social media posts and stakeholder messages that went out. The key messaging is that the program is looking for volunteers that have a basic understanding of income tax and are interested in helping out in their community. Clinic and program promotion will begin at the start of February and come to a close at the end of April. The campaign will use social media posts, print articles, radio spots, and testimonial videos to highlight virtual tax clinics and the services available at the free tax clinics. The campaign will feature individuals who have used the service in the past and who can provide personal testimonials on their experience. The key message is that the organizations and their volunteers make an essential contribution to helping Canadians receive their entitled benefits and credits. Finally, the volunteer appreciation phase will begin at the start of May and continue for 3 months. This will include certificates, thank you letters, and social media posts about all the great work that our volunteers and organizations do. This concludes the formal presentation of the CVITP. And again, thank you very much for hosting us today.
Thank you so much, Philip and Sabrina. It's been a really informative presentation with so much great detail. So thank you again. And we're going to move now, as you say, to our Q&A portion. And we've had a few questions come in, so we're going to get to as many as we can in the next 20 minutes or so. And I believe we also have on the line your colleague Elise Allaire, who is also going to be available to support on any Q&A answers. So welcome, Elise. We're glad to have you with us.
Good afternoon. Thank you.
All right. So to our CVITP team, I'll direct these questions generally, and whichever one of you is best placed to respond, please feel free to jump in. All right, so we have a couple questions around the training website, and can you just say a little bit more about how people access that website?
Sure. Was there a specific question, or did you want me to just...
Well, I know you weren't able to share the address, but we have questions for how people navigate to the website itself.
Perfect.
How would they find that information?
The website is available to CVITP partners, and it comes. The link comes in their invitation.
Okay. All right. So make sure you're registered with CVITP, and if they haven't got that information, they can follow up with their local CVIT representative.
Coordinator, yes.
Coordinator. Okay. Perfect. And we have a question about the CVITP management tool that I think you mentioned in the beginning of the presentation. Can you say a little bit more about what that is?
Absolutely, for sure. So that's just a database where we hold all the information for our volunteers, our organizations, the type of clinic that they're holding, the type of the number of clinics that perhaps a volunteer is associated with, and it really helps on our back end to understand when a return is being completed, who it's being completed by, what clinic they're taking parts in, and it helps us to really, I guess, create a fuller picture around who's helping whom and who's doing what within the program. But it's a back-end function that helps us manage the program.
Okay, great, thank you. We have a question about privacy. Can you speak to how you would recommend ensuring privacy of someone's personal information during the drop-off clinic options? For example, is the organization liable if the individual doesn't ever come back to pick up their documents and they still have them on hand?
Well, so I won't speak specifically to the liability, but I can tell you the best ways that you can protect yourself in a situation like that. You can make sure that that you establish a clear drop-off point and a pickup spot for the information. You can either do that through an appointment, have a mailbox that's set up specifically for that reason, or some other matter like that. It's really about the preparation that you take, and really, like, there's the 2 points of contact with an individual. It's when you're receiving the information and when they're picking up the information. And as long as you do everything in your power to make sure you can schedule that time and have the materials exchanged in a very safe manner while respecting social distancing guidelines, then you've done everything in your power to help that individual and limited the liability that you'll have.
Okay, thanks. A question about identification. What if the individual sends a selfie photo of themselves holding their identification?
Again, however you, I guess, confirm identity, it, so it's, I haven't thought about the selfie, honestly, let's be honest.
Okay. Yeah, I guess if you wanted to confirm identity and you had, somewhere to send a photo of themselves with their ID in the same photo, like would that be an option for, yeah, for ID verification?
Absolutely. As long as you can match it to the person that you're helping, then there should be no problems with that. It'd be no different than having a video conference or having even an in-person meeting. As long as you can confirm that that selfie was taken by the individual in question, that should be fine.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you. Can you speak, question about the coin? Can you speak to when registered community agencies can expect to receive access to it?
So in the acceptance letters that are going out, I believe shortly, they will be receiving the coin along with that. So
Okay.
some organizations should have received that, and if not, they will all be receiving them as they receive their acceptance letters into the program this year. So in the next few weeks.
Okay, great. So in a few weeks. Okay, we have a few more questions coming in. Yeah, a few more questions around identity verification. Can it be done on the telephone call with the client and CVITP tax preparer and the CRA agent, like the kind of conference call verification option? Is that still a going method?
So in that way, you have to make sure that you have authorization on our perspective.
Okay.
CRA, we have authorization on file to speak to the individual about the tax return, right? And any of the information. So on a conference call, that can easily be done. The taxpayer would be there on the phone, would be speaking directly to the CRA agent, and would be able to verify identity and also tell the CRA agent that they give authorization to the volunteer to speak to them about their tax, I guess, information. But on a conference call, there shouldn't be much problem.
Okay. All right. Great. Philip, I feel like we're getting all these questions on your end. I know we've got a lot of questions coming in, but thank you for all your ready answers. A question about autofill. Is there any modification for 2020, and is there any and how will that work, and what will be required from community volunteers to use autofill?
So for community volunteers, they won't notice any real difference in autofill and return this year. It'll be just like any other year that you've used it. So there won't be any big changes there. What the big change in that program was that we're now able to go back 3 years. So you can file the 2017, 18, and 19 returns along with the 2020 return. So it's, instead of just being limited to 2 previous years, you're going to be allowed to do 3 previous years, which really helps out for the folks who, individuals who come in who haven't filed for their benefits for the number of years and, have a number of returns to fill out. You can now use AFR to help those individuals, whereas in the past you were stuck filing in other ways.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's great. Even more years available. A question about can a tax volunteer help out a family member like a spouse when doing a family income tax filing? And if so, do we need consent from all individuals?
So I don't know if, okay, so just to make sure I understand, to unpack this question, when you were, to answer it the way I know how to answer it.
Okay.
As the CRA, I can only divulge information to the person that I'm speaking with. And if I want to divulge information to anyone else, I need to have authorization on file in order to do so. So if you have someone, whether or not they're a volunteer, and they're completing returns for their spouse, and they want to contact the CRA to ask information about that return, they would need to have authorization on file, regardless of whether or not you're a volunteer. And without authorization, CRA could not divulge any of that information to a third party. Just that's how we protect individuals' informations. When you're filing a return, though, I know in filing my spouse's return, for example, I have no issues filling out their return and sending it off. But she's also standing on over my shoulder and doing that. In the program, though, I'm assuming this is asking about this tax preparation software that's provided by CRA. And so that's the thing that's nagging in the back of my head. So absolutely, your partner can take part in the CVITP program as long as they meet the criteria that are set out by the CVITP program in your region or area. So that would mean you meet the income levels, you meet and the criteria that are set by your CVITP organization for completing returns.
Okay. Okay, great. Yeah, I appreciate that there's that a lot of these questions don't have one answer depending on the context, but yeah, I appreciate that answer for as best as you can assume based on what's going on with the software and the permissions available and so on. We have a question about for volunteers needing assistance. Is there a best number for them to call for help from CRA if volunteers have questions or issues during their tax filing support?
Absolutely. So we've now, we have a 1-800 number that's given out to all volunteers who can access, who get front of the line access to services by on a 1-800 number. So if they run into issues or problems, they call the 1-800 number and they can get in touch with the CRA agent immediately. Sorry, I'm just looking through my notes as a
sure.
But that phone number used to be available only for during the season for CVITP season, and we've now expanded that to be available year-round. We recognize the fact that we have year-round CVITP clinics, and so the use of that line is now available year-round to our CVITP volunteers. I'm still not finding my notes, but that number, it's a 1-800 number that volunteers can use to get access to the help that they need while completing returns on behalf of the individuals that are in front of them.
Hi, it's Sabrina, and just to add to your answer, Phil, the dedicated line is open to volunteers for specific situations when they're dealing with a specific taxpayer. There is also a way to contact and to communicate with CVITP coordinators if they have general questions relating to the training during the webinars. It's a chat function where you can ask your questions and someone answers you pretty much in real time.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Sabrina. So there's a few more questions coming in, and I know we're starting to get to the end of our time, so we'll do a few more here. Folks, we appreciate that there's a lot more questions than we have time for, so we want to encourage you to, we'll have contact information for our presenters available, and as well, I suppose we would always recommend contact for your local CVITP coordinator for also more follow-up. We have a question around is there any change in the income threshold for program eligibility this year?
No, there's been no change to the income threshold to eligibility this year. That was set just set a number of years ago, and it was revised just a few years, 2 years ago, based on the information that we had. We did a study from of all the populations across Canada and set those income thresholds based on the information we had at the time. They haven't been revised for this year, and so they continue to remain the same.
Okay, that's great. Some questions asking to revisit the whole virtual clinic process. A question about the video conference option. Does this mean that client and volunteer are connected by video at the same time as, like they're connected by a video meeting and they're filing the return together over video?
However you set that up is up to the individual organization, but that is our intent, yes. So that a video conferencing would be just like a face-to-face meeting. Someone comes and sits in front of you and you complete the return while there, it'd be the exact same thing. That's our envisioning of it.
Okay. So the volunteer on their end, they still have the software open and they're still asking the questions that they would normally ask and filling in the return. It's just over video rather than in person is the basic idea.
That's exactly it.
Okay, perfect. And then we have a few more questions coming in on autofill. Some folks who haven't used autofill before and just curious to know more about what the benefits are, because not everyone's using it yet. So maybe, I don't know if you could speak to kind of the pros and cons, if there are cons of using autofill.
Honestly, there's no cons. If I were to sum it up in one word, it's accuracy. So you have someone come present themselves to you at a volunteer clinic, and they, have a few slips here and there. You're not sure if they're all of them. What Autofill My Return does is you submit the information to CRA, and CRA will pre-populate the tax return with information that the CRA has already been provided by employers or the banks or anywhere else where we've received information slips from, and pre-populate that to the return so that the volunteer can continue on and go from that point, I guess. So the Autofill My Return really increases the accuracy of filing. It really helps with, if somebody forgot a T4 slip that, they worked for the first 2 months at a certain employer and they didn't bring that with them to the clinic, this will ensure that that gets picked up and included in the filing.
Okay, great. Thanks for the explanation. Yeah, I realize it's a relatively new feature, but it does seem to have a lot of benefits. We have a question about is there any way virtual tax clinics can help in the case of returns for deceased people?
So what I'd suggest here is perhaps Sabrina, do you want to pull up your training packet piece and show the deceased how to file a return for a deceased individual? I believe that is one of the profiles that we have, and I think it's great to use the training just to explain and walk through that right now.
Sure. Yeah, Sabrina, I've given you presenter access again. If you're able to call up your site, yeah, that's a great idea.
Sure. Unfortunately, though, deceased taxpayers are a more complex situation, so it's not covered in our training. I'm so sorry, but it's because there could be a lot of different ramifications, and we're really trying to keep them, very simple. So, because of all the back and forth, it's not considered a simple tax situation.
Okay. All right.
No problem.
All right. I'm going to find one more question here. Again, thank you everyone for sharing your questions today. We've just had a wealth of them coming in. I think we have a few questions, Sabrina, around the finer details of training and how and when those are being delivered. So maybe could you just do a quick reminder of, if people haven't started their volunteer training yet, what are the key next steps for them to follow and the process there?
Sure, no problem. So we're currently putting the final touches on the training for the 2020 tax season. So the website will be up and running with the updated information in a couple of weeks. And the link, as I mentioned, will be available to the CITP volunteers. They'll get the link to that. And for the webinars, the different coordinators in each region will be sending out an invitation with all that information. And there's a link where you can sign up to the different webinars with all the dates and the subjects. So that's the other option as well. So it'll be to look out for in the next couple of weeks.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
And we have two, if I also can add, maybe we have two releases. We have a first release in December with all on the website general information. And in the next few weeks, we'll be getting the activation keys from UFile, and that allows us to create our mock-ups and our frequent client scenarios with the answers. So there's also a second release in January with all the solutions, so people can really practice and see if they come up, when doing the test, to the same results as our when we do it ourselves. So it's a good way to practice. And in January, we also get the information relating to what's new, because there's been a lot of new features this year. We bring up the CERB, we mentioned the coin. So all those new initiatives will be in our January release under what's new.
Great, thank you, Sabrina. And I definitely appreciate that this hour certainly cannot cover absolutely everything that you're bringing in this year. And for any volunteers on the line, definitely we hope that you'll be able to get access to your training as soon as it's available, and dive in with your organization and continue to learn from those experienced volunteers. And share knowledge and expertise as you navigate virtual clinics, as this is certainly a very adaptive format, but one that's still very new for many of us. So thank you everyone for spending this hour with us, and thank you for Philip and Sabrina's presentation. I know this is a lot to try and cover, and this is really only the tip of the iceberg in many ways. So thank you again. We hope that you'll continue to join us, because we actually have another tax filing presentation for you next week on a new program method that some of our community partners have tested this year on assisted tax filing. So if you're interested to just keep talking about taxes, we have more opportunities to do that next week. So I hope you'll join us. The link is there in the slides, which you've also got available as a handout on this webinar. But we will be uploading all of our webinar materials from today onto our Learning Hub so that you can access it later, revisit any details, or share with your fellow team members as may be useful. So thank you again, and we hope that you'll join us for our next webinar at the closing of 2019. We hope that you'll have some good productive time with your programs before our holidays, and that your tax filing season goes well this coming year. So thank you again, everyone, and we hope you have a great afternoon.
Thank you very much.